Harold Peterson had welcomed his new neighbor, Mabel, with homemade cake, only to find it discarded in her trash hours later. For weeks, Mabel's cars blocked the shared driveway, while her parties kept Harold's wife awake at night. When Martha, Harold's wife, collapsed with chest pains, Harold's desperate knocks on Mabel's door went ignored. What Harold did next, you'll never guess. Harold Peterson wasn't a man who asked for much in life. At 78 years old, the retired construction worker had built his life around simple pleasures and quiet routines. His suburban home had been his sanctuary for over 4 decades, a place where he and his wife, Martha, had grown old together. Their property shared a driveway with the neighboring house, which has been vacant for a while now. The for sale sign next door had been up for just 2 weeks when a sleek SUV pulled into the driveway. Harold watched from his window as a young woman in business attire stepped out, phone pressed to her ear. Mabel Winters had arrived, and life on their quiet street was about to change. Harold believed in welcoming new neighbors properly. The day after Mabel moved in, he spent the morning baking Martha's special recipe apple cake and brought it over to her door. Mabel answered wearing workout clothes, seeming annoyed at the interruption. She accepted the cake with barely a mumbled thanks before closing the door. That evening, while taking out his trash, Harold spotted his untouched cake in Mabel's garbage bin, still in its wrapping, tossed away without being sampled. The slight stung, but Harold decided not to mention it. Everyone deserved a chance to settle in, he thought. Within days, however, the true nature of their new neighbor became impossible to ignore. The first party started on a Thursday night. Cars lined the street as guests arrived, music pulsing so loudly that the photos on Harold's walls vibrated. Martha, who suffered from insomnia, lay awake until 3 a.m. when the last guest finally departed. The following weekend brought an even louder gathering. Mabel and her friends showed complete disregard for the shared driveway, often blocking it entirely. Harold found himself trapped several times, unable to take Martha to her doctor appointments or run essential errands. After 3 weeks of disruption, Harold decided a neighborly conversation was in order. He waited until Sunday morning to do that. Harold kept his tone polite as he explained the situation. He mentioned Martha's health issues and how she needed her rest. He asked if Mabel could keep the volume down after 10 o'clock. Mabel's response crushed any hope of an easy resolution. She informed Harold that this was her home and suggested they should invest in some earplugs if they couldn't handle noise. Before Harold could respond, she closed the door in his face. The following week, Harold tried again, this time addressing the parking issue. He explained how the blocked driveway prevented him from getting his car out when needed. Mabel cut him off, telling him to stop being such a troublesome old man who hates young people having fun. The parties continued. The blocked driveway became a regular occurrence. Martha's health began to suffer from the constant sleep disruption. Her blood pressure medication didn't seem to be working as effectively. Desperate for resolution, Harold approached the neighborhood association, and the president agreed to speak with Mabel. But the intervention proved fruitless. Harold felt helpless. For the first time in 40 years, he dreaded being in his own home. Martha's doctor warned that constant stress and sleep deprivation could worsen her existing heart condition. On a Tuesday evening, the situation reached its breaking point. Harold had been forced to park on the street because Mabel's car was blocking the driveway again. He and Martha were watching television when Martha suddenly clutched her chest, her face contorted in pain. She struggled to breathe as Harold rushed to her side. He helped her to the door, promising to bring the car around. But when he stepped outside, his heart sank. The street was packed with cars from another of Mabel's gatherings. His vehicle was completely hemmed in. Panic rising, Harold ran to Mabel's house. Music blared from inside as he pounded desperately on the door. He shouted, explaining that Martha needed immediate medical attention. He could see lights on and hear the noise inside, but no one answered him. For 15 agonizing minutes, Harold alternated between checking on Martha and trying to get someone's attention at Mabel's house. With Martha now unconscious, Harold's desperation reached new heights. He ran down the street, banging on doors and screaming for help, until he reached James Wilson's home 3 doors down. James immediately grasped the urgency of the situation. Together, they rushed back to Harold's home. Martha's breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. With no way to move any of the blocking vehicles, the 2 men carefully carried Martha down the street to James's car. James rushed to the hospital while Harold sat in the back, holding Martha's hand. Emergency room staff whisked her away immediately upon arrival. Shortly after midnight, a doctor emerged with news. Martha had suffered a severe cardiac event. Had they arrived even 10 minutes later, the outcome might have been catastrophic. Harold spent the night beside Martha's bed. When morning came, a nurse convinced him to go home, shower, and return with some personal items for Martha. Arriving home exhausted and emotionally drained, Harold saw Mabel's car still parked across the driveway, exactly where it had been the night before. Through his window, he could see her moving about, preparing for her day as if nothing had happened. As if her actions hadn't nearly cost Martha her life. Harold sat in his living room for hours, staring at Mabel's car through the window. When evening came and Mabel's lights went out, he made his decision. Moving with purpose despite his exhaustion, Harold brought out bags of quick-setting cement, bricks, and his construction tools. Working through the night with decades of masonry experience, Harold constructed a solid cement barrier across the entrance of their shared driveway. The wall stood 3 feet high, tall enough to block any vehicle, but with a narrow walking path on one side. By dawn, the cement had set, and Harold packed a bag and returned to the hospital to be with Martha. Mabel woke to discover her car trapped behind a cement wall that hadn't existed the day before. Her initial reaction was rage. For nearly a week, Mabel was forced to take the bus to work. She missed a crucial client meeting, which cost her company a contract and earned her a formal query. After days of no response from Harold, Mabel began approaching neighbors, her tone shifting from demanding to pleading. Most simply closed their doors. Only James Wilson finally engaged with her. He asked if she knew why there was now a wall across her driveway. When she complained, James explained what had happened the night she refused to answer her door. He described carrying an unconscious woman to his car because Mabel couldn't be bothered to respond to her desperate neighbor. For perhaps the first time, reality broke through Mabel's self-centered worldview. The color drained from her face as she listened. She had never imagined a genuine emergency was unfolding. When Harold returned home with Martha, who was still weak but recovering, Mabel was waiting on their porch. She approached tentatively, genuinely remorseful for the first time. She admitted she'd had no idea it was a medical emergency and offered a sincere apology. A neighborhood meeting was arranged, and Mabel publicly apologized to Harold, Martha, and everyone affected by her inconsiderate actions. Harold accepted her apology and helped establish proper parking boundaries once the barrier was removed. The months that followed revealed a transformed neighbor. Mabel kept her music at reasonable levels and always parked with consideration. Most surprisingly, she began checking on Martha regularly, bringing her meals during recovery. Through Harold's drastic actions, a difficult neighbor had learned a valuable lesson about community and consideration. What would you have done in Harold's situation? Would you have taken such dramatic action, or would you have found another way to deal with an inconsiderate neighbor?